Around 8:45 a.m. on the morning of September 11th, 2001, people along the west side of Manhattan heard the piercing whine of a jet plane moving south down the Hudson. Everything about its trajectory was wrong. Heading south along an airway normally reserved for northbound traffic, it was moving much too fast and much too close to the ground, nearly 500 miles per hour at an altitude of just 900 feet, more than twice the speed permitted for aircraft that low. It took less than 90 seconds for American Airlines Flight 11 to hurtle the entire length of Manhattan Island. A little after 8:46 a.m., the huge 137-ton Boeing 767, measuring more than half a football field in length from wingtip to wingtip, and carrying more than 9,000 gallons of highly inflammable jet fuel, flashed across the final 20 blocks from Canal Street to the World Trade Center, and tore through the north wall of the North Tower between the 94th and 98th floors. Instantly killing everyone on board and wreaking incomprehensible carnage across 5 full floors of the building. Witnesses on the upper floors of the South Tower were stunned to see a wall of flame burst through the south windows of Tower 1, 130 feet away, followed by a shower of disintegrating desks, files, furniture, computer terminals, airplane parts, and burning bodies.
If you were just below where the plane hit, your ceilings fell, you saw the glint of the plane going overhead, there's an overwhelming feeling of terror, and you were probably knocked off your feet. And of course, if you were in the zone itself, you may have died instantly, but even very close, and this is very tragic, very close to the regions of impact, there were people who lived for long minutes as they sought refuge from, the building flames, the tremendous heat. A couple of them even were able to phone. And then often in that region, their lives ended quickly in the fire, or they chose to leap from the tower.
I was heading for the Holland Tunnel, which has a 4-block concourse, if you want to call it, leading to the toll booth. And as I turned into the first of those 4 blocks and I looked up, I said, oh my God, there was a hole in tower number 1. And my first thought was, it can't be a helicopter, the hole's too big. And the second was, my God, it can't be a commercial plane because they're instructed to fly into the river if they have problems. I knew that.
By 8:55, an army of firemen, police officers, emergency medical personnel, and government officials, including the mayor himself, had begun to descend on Lower Manhattan, along with an army of reporters, photographers, and television crews, as the machinery of the largest media apparatus in the world began to focus on the 16-acre site. At 9:02 a.m., little more than 15 minutes after the attack, millions of people in the metropolitan region, and tens of millions more across the country and around the world, were staring intently at the smoldering skyline of Lower Manhattan, when a dark shape appeared on the horizon above the New Jersey lowlands and came hurtling across the upper bay.
I got out of my car. Other people did. And suddenly I saw plane number 2 coming from the south over the Statue of Liberty, going very fast, they say between 500 and 600 miles an hour. And I saw it smash into the south wall of number 2 in an oblique angle. I saw this big ball of flame, and the nose came out on the north side and the east side. And my first reaction, my God, there's poor people above because they're going to wipe out all the staircases and all the sprinkler systems. That airplane just went sliced right through it. And the power of such a big plane at that speed. And for a moment, incredible sadness for the people there, and then an incredible anger, feeling that somebody had deliberately rammed into those towers and those poor innocent people that were in there.
I was at the Tweed Courthouse on Chambers Street, right behind City Hall. I grabbed a notebook and ran to the street in time to see the second one hit. I knew right away, obviously, it was terrorism. This amazing fireball that came roaring towards Broadway. and people on the street corner just going, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit." That expression must have been uttered like 10 million times that day. Just astonishment at what they were looking at.
The second plane had struck the South Tower at 9:02:54 a.m., just 16 minutes after the first plane went in. By then, the first teams of firemen and rescue workers had already arrived at the foot of the North Tower, where they were greeted by a scene of horror and devastation that defied the imagination. On the Austin Tobin Plaza, there were corpses everywhere. The mangled bodies of men and women who had already jumped or fallen from the upper floors of the building, and the charred remains of passengers from Flight 11, some still belted into their seats. Far above, meanwhile, in the upper reaches of the towers themselves, the gaping black holes where the planes had gone in marked a stark dividing line between life and death.
In the North Tower, the plane struck at the center, and it also struck much higher up. And because it struck at the center, the fuel immediately went down the shafts and created a much broader fire. The flames were much more intense. The number of floors that were available to move up and down were many fewer. So what happened was people were breaking windows in the North Tower, desperate to get air, and there was no place to go because there were no stairwells that were open up and down. People were stacked 4 or 5 on top of each other at the broken windows, desperate to breathe. And other people were hanging on to each other across the steel columns from window to window, hanging out of the windows, desperate to breathe, and just, grasping each other to keep hold of the building.
One of the most horrific scenes in the history of the nation took place 1,000 feet above Lower Manhattan. And it took the lives of people who were staring down at safety, at the most populous city in the nation, civilization at its peak. But they didn't have anywhere to get there. And there's really few words to describe how terrible that must have been.
By 9:30, ordinary life had all but ceased across the city, as millions of New Yorkers and hundreds of millions more around the world looked on in shock and disbelief at the nightmarish images unfolding in real time on TV.
You usually can gauge things, within a few minutes, so that they may start getting worse. But at one time you say, well, this is what they are. But this was something that started getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
At 9:38, word came that terrorists had commandeered a third jetliner and crashed it into the Pentagon, killing everyone on board and 126 people on the ground. And not long after, that a fourth plane had crashed into a hillside in rural Pennsylvania, brought down by some of its own heroic passengers before it could reach its intended target in the nation's capital.